Is this the choo-choo dance? We were just
It's
talking about a train.
like
Choo-choo.
yeah, it's like, I just feel like I need to get moving.
We do need to get moving on a lot of things in
Oh,
the world right now.
yes.
Well, welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Breaking the Barriers with Red Moon Eagle and I. We are always so delighted to be here with you to just talk about things that need to be talked about and
Mhm.
topics that maybe people aren't exploring, or maybe they only have one aspect of that they've really looked at.
Right.
And I always like to say, especially on topics like today, where we're going to be talking about null voids and dark entities, that you take and leave what's right or wrong for you. You are the
Yeah.
arbiter of your existence. You determine what is true for you. So take what fits and leave the rest. But
Yep.
we're going to present our perspective on things. So, Red,
Yeah.
if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Red Moon Eagle. I'm a psychic catalyst, a teacher, and a healer. And I am exploring just like everybody else. I learn new things every day. And this is just something that I think helped clarify some of the toxic fear-based worldview when I had been given that a lot as a child. And as I grew up, I went, wait a minute, this isn't what people think it is. I think I can clarify this. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. If we can alleviate some fear for people, right? Because
Yeah.
we've got so much fear swirling in the collective right now. Any little bit that
Yeah.
helps, I think, is worthwhile. So,
Oh, yeah.
and just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I inspire people to be authentically themselves, and I shout from the rooftops that everyone deserves love and authenticity and integrity and dignity and all of those things. And I
Yeah.
specifically right now help visionary leaders step into themselves so that they can have the impact that they need to have in this very confusing collective right now. So,
Yeah.
one of the reasons this topic came up was actually sort of the political situation that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And people like to, when they don't agree with someone,
Mm-hmm.
when people don't agree with someone, they like to fling around labels or accusations to try and make sense of why someone might be so different from them or have such a different perspective. And we don't have to get
Yeah.
quite into that, but we need to differentiate what's mental health stuff, what is actually some kind of blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just say it because we swear on this program, blueprint fuckery, right? Like someone that's
That's right
deviating
there.
from their blueprint. And
Yep.
then we have like actual non-physical entities that might be going through something. And that's what we're going to
Yeah.
try and tease apart today. Because I know like people go around talking about demons all the time and so let's start to just crack this open. Can you just start by defining for us what a null void is?
So a null void / dark entity is the same thing. And a null void is someone who is off their blueprint. They're in a human body. They're animated. They are here with us, but they're not on their blueprint. So they're not following their own plan. This could have been abandoned lifetimes ago. It could have been abandoned 2 years ago. It could have been any of those things. But they're not in the loop with the rest of us. They've chosen to not be in the loop with the rest of us. They have chosen to not be part of the shadow light journey. They are in the null. They are in this null void place, which can be perceived by those that are in the shadow light journey as dark entities because it makes you feel uncomfortable. And if you are uncomfortable, people go to fear. And when they are in fear, they go dark, 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 evil. And there's some intricacies with null voids that
Right.
identify them. So it's not. I think one of the big things that I think I have to clarify a lot is they create fuckery with everything around them, but they do it in a way that they don't want to be the center of attention. They're not going to be the president of the United States. They're not going to be Anybody who gets a lot of light attention because they don't want to be seen by the light because they have chosen not to participate in this. So there is a confusing thing that comes with describing null voids, because I can describe them and people are like, oh, I know who that person is, or that must be what's going on in politics, or that must be why this person is treating this other person so horribly. And I'm like, they're more subtle than that, which is why they are so successful at creating fuckery and keeping people trapped in their own karma.
And so that's sort of the thing about null voids that I want people to understand. I've been having so many conversations about the karmic swirl lately with a variety of people.
Oh yeah.
And just encouraging people to step out of the swirl, whether they're in it or not, if they're helping people out or they themselves are in it, like that's what we're here to do, is step out of the swirl. And null voids are like this anchor kind of in the swirl, pulling people down further into it instead of giving them a hand up. Yeah. And I love that you've really clarified here that they're not trying to like have a spotlight on them. These are people that are like on the edge or in a community. I know I've had a lot of conversations with people who are like, there's this person that hangs out at this club or this, music studio or this art studio or this munch or like whatever community event it is. And whenever they're around, it's like there's just a black hole in the room and they're always so negative and causing chaos. That is the null void, from what I'm understanding.
It can be. I mean, the thing about null voids, which I think has been very tricky, is that they can also be misunderstood as those that are really trapped in a very tight karmic circle. So when you're in a very, very tight karmic circle, there's no movement. You swirl around that same icky, ucky, can't get out of your own way stuff, but there's no movement. There's no ability to recognize that you're stuck. And a null void is more that. With a null void, do not look at me, don't pay me any attention. I'm here to help this person. So usually they attach themselves to somebody who's very tight in that karmic way, and they attach themselves to them, and then whatever crack is available for them to draw them further into that off the blueprint pattern. Like, you could have somebody who has no history of alcohol abuse or drug abuse. You could have somebody who has no history of hurting other people with their temper, just really simple things. I say simple things, but the null void will then encourage these bad behaviors in the light of just express yourself. Alcohol's not evil by nature. You could have a drink, here's another drink, here's another drink, here's another drink. And next thing you know, that person that's so tight in that karmic thing, they've become the alcoholic, they've become the druggie, they have become that person who explodes and justifies their bad behavior in the name of, well, I'm just doing what's right for me, right? But it could be very much supported by this null void who doesn't want to take credit for it, doesn't want the light shining on them, but wants all the attention of pulling this person in that karmic swirl further away from their blueprint. It's very subtle. And you can have people that are kind of like the black hole in the room type thing, but you have to be careful. Are they seeking attention? Because if they're seeking attention, they are not null voids. If they are there supporting someone else who is seeking attention, and yet they never accept any of the attention for the support, but yet clearly they are creating the problem, that is the null void.
Yeah, this brings up, I really just want to speak briefly to empathy and energy sensitivity and how that gets twisted, because I think that this is where people get confused, especially, and think that that person is a null void when really they are dealing with narcissism or sociopathy, because their trauma responses and their natural blueprint and gifts have become distorted. So empaths, when an empath, who, for summary, is a person who has little feelers that come out and they kind of tap, touch, taste what other people's emotional quality is. When an empath becomes really distorted from trauma, from repeated wounds from not taking care of themselves, from getting away with things, right? Not being held accountable, they can develop narcissistic personality disorder or something that looks like that, narcissistic
Oh
trait.
yeah.
Versus a person with energy sensitivity, which is a person who walks in the room and goes, ooh, the vibes are off, and can feel
Mm-hmm.
this sort of static charge or just the ambiance in a space. That person, when that becomes disordered, can become what we would call sociopathy or sociopathic tendencies, because they're emotionless. They don't seem to
Right.
understand other people's emotions, and to
Or
an
don't
unhealthy degree.
care.
Or don't
Don't
care.
care.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's become twisted, but these people, absolutely, we know that somebody with narcissistic traits absolutely wants attention, as
Yes.
does somebody with
The sociopath.
sociopathy.
Yeah.
So that is a good differentiation, that the null
Mhm.
void is like, it's almost like they've stepped out of even engaging with the human experience.
Oh yeah, they have. They have chosen not to participate. That's one of the phrases I use a lot with null voids, because it really is a key factor in identifying the difference between dealing with somebody who's just really wounded and does bad things, right? Like they hurt people, hurt people. We know this. This is a not surprising new thing.
Right.
But there is a difference when you're dealing with somebody that clearly is hurting people, but it's a little confusing when they, like, is that person seeking attention from hurting people? Help me, help me, help me. I need my needs met. Versus, oh no, don't look at me. Not only don't look at me, but I didn't do that. Why would you say I did that? I'm here to help somebody else. Why would you think that of me? Oh, please don't take my picture. Oh, I would never want that kind of attention. And they will disappear from lives of people that start to notice the null void piece of them. As soon as they, and I do suspect that is very like unconscious behavior, because they have chosen not to participate. So they're not even on their blueprint. So
Right.
it's a little bit, they're not even in the same wavelength as anybody else. But I've watched them. And honestly, I would love to have a conversation with one, but they run away from me, because
I bet they do.
this is another key aspect, is that as soon as they think you recognize that they are a null void, they don't participate with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it happen where someone is in a person's life and this person is like, oh, I think I've figured it out. And they try to have the conversation with that person. They get ghosted in the most extreme way. And the people left behind are standing around going, did I just imagine that that person existed? Like they disappear. And they don't come out of their body. They don't actually like disappear, but it feels like that because they don't want to be seen.
Like an energetic withdrawal, just like a full pulling
Well,
back from everybody
it's
and
it's
everything.
it's more than, so this is another thing. Energy sensitives, when they come across the null void, there is an absence of energetic fluctuation in the field around this person. That's where you get that uncomfortable, like, that's a human being, but yet I can't feel them. Energy sensitives will feel that. They'll go, what is off, right? An empath, when they touch a null void, they get nothing. You get nothing. It's not confusion. It's not anger. It's not resentment. It is nothing. That's why it's null void. There is nothing there. I suspect genuinely that some of the weird conspiracy theories around NPCs in the world are null voids, because how they are describing them is a null void.
Yeah, there's an emptiness there that exists because the blueprint has been rejected, because
Mm-hmm.
we're a product of our blueprint. Like
Yeah.
we wrote the blueprint with some
Mm-hmm.
help and came in with
Yeah.
these grand designs, and if we abandon that, right, we can absolutely stray from it for a while,
Yeah.
but it's when it's completely abandoned, like that
Mm-hmm.
purpose, that a person just sort of becomes a shell of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
in that shell state, it would make sense. I'm trying to understand the perspective, and put
Right.
myself in a null void's shoes. Like I could see it being like I need to attach onto other entities for some purpose. But because I'm not on my blueprint, and everybody's blueprint, I believe, is out of love and like for
Of
love
course,
ultimately,
100%, all the
right?
time.
But there's
Yes.
no, if you're off your blueprint, that access is going to be really not there.
You know, I think it's interesting. I would never have thought to put myself in a null void perspective. Um, I have asked a lot of questions of my guides about null voids because I'm fascinated. I would love to pin one down and ask 5 million questions. That's never going to happen. They run away from me. But I have talked to people who've been in relationships with null voids or families who have encountered them in different aspects. I have had clients that have null voids born into their family and the fuckery that creates. That's a whole different part of the conversation. You can ask me questions about that in a minute. But one of the consistent things is that what's been described to me is a null void chooses not to participate. So they're in this dark place that they're very alone. And the attachment to someone who's on the verge of possibly riskily coming off a blueprint is this weird, twisted psychological perspective of, if I could just have somebody join me in the darkness, I wouldn't be alone. But they can't seem to understand that if you get off your blueprint, you don't have connection because you've turned away from that universal, unconditional love connection that the rest of us have.
Yeah.
Even when you're in the most hurt place and you do awful things, there's a piece of you that does belong to that love and light, always. The only ones that have chosen not to participate are the null voids.
Yeah. So the big question that comes up is, why would one choose not to participate? Is this deep, deep generational wounding? Because you mentioned it can come from, a null void can reincarnate and still be a null void. So they can come into families. But like, why would someone choose not to participate?
I don't know the answer to that question. I feel like I've asked that a lot. And I think the only answer I seem to get fairly consistently is it's free choice. We all have so many choices in our blueprint, and somebody might decide, I don't like my blueprint. I don't like what I've come here to do, or I don't believe that it's a thing, and I'm going to choose to not participate. And the reincarnation thing with null voids is very confusing too, because where you and I, when we pass from this physical flesh, we go to a place where we can review, we can process, we can talk about it, we can come back, we can go somewhere else. Like there's this, I don't know, some people call it the waiting places.
The waiting room, the bus stop, the cosmic
null
bus
voids
stop.
don't have that. Right. Yeah. Null voids don't recognize that that's a thing. So they go from one body to the other.
Interesting. Yeah. So Ike asked in the chat, are they trying to come off of their blueprint because they don't trust the universe, or do they feel trapped by the blueprint path, like fighting for agency by being alone? And you kind of just spoke a little bit to that, Red. When I tune in, I get the sense of, like rejection, just like complete rejection of the self. It is a complete rejection of the self. And people do that sometimes, but when it becomes chronic, I imagine that is when someone slips completely into that null void state. So how does one get out of that?
So I think this is the part that my very simple brain goes, just turn around and be in the light. But apparently it's a little bit more complex than that. And yet it's not. I've been told by guides over and over and over again. I've actually been told by other psychics, turn to the light. Like that is the answer to deeply held traumas, in the flow of the shadow through. You have to go through the shadow into the light, turn into the light is the solution. It's an oversimplified version, but it is the solution for null voids. Now, because they've rejected, one of the things I have seen, I haven't seen a lot of it, but I know they exist because I've had discussions where these beautiful green entity, vibrational frequency greens come in, and their entire purpose is to retrieve and get a null void to participate again. They are rare, and not everybody's purpose is that. But when that is the purpose, they come in with pretty good guns, so to speak. They have the ability to really have that tenacious attachment. And ironically, from the outside looking in, it's extraordinarily healthy most of the time because they're mentoring, they're showing, they're demonstrating that healthy. But the null void, I've actually heard stories where null voids have rejected that green's job, but the green just follows them around. It's almost like the weird reverse stalking thing, but it's more subtle than that. It is very subtle, but you know, there's layers. I've seen some interesting things in the world with null voids, but not everybody's your null void that you've encountered. Do not assume that it's just because you recognize them that's your job to help them, because they can suck you in really quick. Remember, it's a null void. There's a void there. Whatever you give, they will take. And there's no bottom to that well. They will just take and take and take and take.
Yeah.
Awful.
Oh. And that it's so sad because again, I'm like really trying to understand what would cause someone to end up in that state, and it's got to be deep trauma because I know everything stems back to trauma in this
we know that
three-dimensional reality, right? So it's got to be deep trauma.
Right.
It's got to be a rejection of the self, and then rejection of love and others. So what a lot of times when people hear dark entity, they're thinking more entities that exist off of this plane of existence, things that are, you know, astral or otherworldly that aren't here. So what is your stance on that versus, like, for example, I could absolutely see like people who believe in ghosts, right? A lot of times people say like ghosts are people who didn't process their stuff in life. There's like some really high charged emotion or thing unresolved, and it gets them stuck into this this plane versus crossing over. I'm curious your take on those things.
Okay, I feel like I am obligated to untangle a little bit of the overlap there in that description. So I've done so much, like gone with groups to go ghost hunting, and then there's nothing there. And people are swearing that, oh, I got a chill or something was there. Yeah, you can't, I have picked up on stuff too, but let me clarify. There is such a thing as what I call kinetic smearing. And it's really funny. The Catholic Church actually talks about this and some of the difference between what's bad energy in a space and an actual entity that's smearing can be collected. So if you have, for example, a family and they've rented an apartment and they have a lot of trauma and they're fighting all the time, he's abusing her, she's abusing him, the kids are being abused, maybe somebody kills somebody. Okay, that's a pretty drastic scenario, right? That space could have a layer of that trauma energetically absorbed into, depending depth of that trauma in that space. And maybe the next couple that moves in has no protections about it, and they soak some of that in and they start behaving that way. So maybe you end up with a house or an apartment that seems like everybody that lives there has shit happen, right? And it's not cleared, it's not cleansed, and just more and more people live there. And next thing you know, that apartment has a big, you know, history of all of this trauma and bad things happening. And next thing you know, somebody's like, well, it's the ghost of the person that was killed in that apartment, right? You've just added another layer of fear and manifesting that fear using the leftover kinetic smearing of that place. You can kind of create a ghost-like feel to a place by giving additional power to that kinetic smearing, taking that kinetic smearing and giving it a name, a purpose, a thing, right? Now, ghosts, as in people who are haunting a space, they're leftover spirit, they have not connected to the light, they haven't gone on to the next waiting place, whatever, right? That's very rare, one. And I suspect from my own experiences with this is that they are genuinely connected to the land in a very specific way. And when they pass from this mortal coil, they get a little confused in the bridge. It very rarely, actually, true ghosts that I've encountered very rarely actually have bad traumatic things necessarily, any different than anybody else when they die. It's that they're genuinely just kind of confused because they're so connected to the land, the place, the anchoring in earth, and they can't, they're like the connections to the body to go into this other place. And that's why me or people who do kind of like mediumship, going into haunted places to help them find the light. That's what we spend that whole time doing, is trying to convince somebody that, yes, you did have a body. Yes, you do have to leave the body behind. Earth isn't going anywhere. She's a sentient being. And usually when you say that, they kind of go, oh, yeah, I still feel her. How do I meet her? You go, you have to go over here. And they go into the light and they're gone, and that place is not haunted anymore. It's so easy that it's mind-boggling that entire movies have been made over this to make it so complicated. But hauntings are very rare, okay? Like, true hauntings are rare because they're kind of lost. They don't mess with people. That's different. They don't do all this other stuff. Kinetic smearing, if you add fear, your own fear, to a kinetic smeared space, and if you're energy sensitive, because I have encountered this. I had a client, super energy sensitive. She's like, I'm in a haunted apartment. I'm like, oh, really? She goes, yeah, you got to come look at it. I went, okay. I went and looked. Lots of kinetic smearing. She moved into a house where clearly, like, the people who'd lived there before drank a lot, did a lot of drugs, and questionable behavior. And she's picking up on it. And she also had not figured out how to transmute her own energy. So the lights were flickering, doors were slamming, things were falling off the wall. There's no poltergeist there. She just needs to fucking cleanse and start transmuting. I was going
to say, that's her energy sensitivity doing all of those things, probably.
Yes! And amplifying the smearing that she didn't realize she needed to cleanse. And again, it's fascinating to me that people go to a place of fear and confusion and they want to say, oh, it's a poltergeist. Personally, I've never met a poltergeist. I don't know if they exist or not. I've never encountered one. I have encountered alternative dimensional entities that live in our dimension. They're not scary. Never met one that scared me at all. Kind of startled me once when I wasn't sure what I was looking at. But then I was, oh, okay, you're that. Okay, moving on. Never met a ghost that couldn't move to the light if you did it right. And it's really simple. Don't overcomplicate the damn thing. And it's very rare that you actually have a haunting with that much kinetic smearing. Usually people just create that shit and don't even know that they've created it. Cleanse the damn place and move on. Paint the walls something different. I don't know.
And that's just such an interesting thing, because that does get into the differences between empathy, energy sensitivity, how we perceive information.
Oh, yeah.
Justin and I watched this hilarious ghost hunting show where one of the ghost hunters totally doesn't believe it and he's just having a good time. And the other guy is clearly sensitive and amps himself up and like, oh my gosh, everything. And that's how people get all the time. We like to amp ourselves up. So another thing I'd like to untangle is, because again, we're talking about dark entities here, and a lot of people have a lot of ideas of what that means. So demons and possessions and all of these things that people get very like worked up about. What's really going on there?
Well, I think you kind of need to explain to me what you mean, because there's a lot of different things that people have explained to me, and there's a different answer for all of them, and it's pretty simple, but
yeah. So a lot of people that I've talked to that have fear, okay, there's always fear,
right?
That there are demonic entities, that they can't see or perceive that exist on
Okay.
some other dimension, but that can
Okay.
somehow influence them, influence their
Okay.
will, create painful experiences, make deals with, be possessed by these things.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the last one first, just because that one is a hot topic that I feel like I have definitely poked at that a lot. Nothing can possess you without your permission.
Bingo.
First off,
Yep.
period, period, period with a big ass, big dot.
That is,
period.
yeah, glad you're saying that, because that's my thing. If you believe you will be possessed, you're gonna suddenly
You
have
could
some
invite
things
something.
happening. Yeah.
The other thing about possession, quote unquote, channeling gifts, because that's part of this. There are people that have a gift that is associated with the word channeling, like channeling entities.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that gift, you are more susceptible to possession. Again, you have to give permission. And two, your guides are fucking powerful. And I'm just going to say that again. Your guides are fucking powerful. Okay? So if you're asking for possession, you're asking to channel, guess who's first in line?
Probably not the most aligned ones.
Right? So if you have been possessed by something that's making you kill people, have you been possessed, or is your ego taken over?
Are we
Great
looking for
question.
an excuse as to why we can get away with
Right.
our bad
Uh-huh.
behavior?
Right. And then the other side of it is, to move on to one of the other ones, you asked, like, people believe that there's these evil demons floating around that can make you do bad things or
Well, I mean, we have
influence
a main
your.
religion out there that thinks that there's
Oh,
this
right.
satanic
Okay.
figure who can literally, like,
No, no, no,
botch your
no, no,
free
no,
will. And I
no.
obviously I don't believe that, but like there's so
Well,
many people who do.
okay, and I have talked to people like, but I've seen these things. I said, I believe you have seen these things. And how much of that is reinforcing your own fear paradigm? And do you want to bring that fear paradigm further into your life, or do you want to work through your own trauma so that you don't go to the fear paradigm every single time? So that's a separate conversation. But when it comes to the demon entities, these dark entities floating around that are going to possess you, there's a couple things that I'd like to clarify. One, no one can take away your free choice, period. Now, null voids are extremely good at making you think that you can give up your free choice. They do that really well, but you can't, okay? If you have given your power away to somebody, that's on you, period. That's not someone else. Victim mentality is a whole thing that kind of plays into this, but there are entities, I use that word very loosely, that can be created from energy and thought that can, they're kind of like, think of like a remote viewing. Like you're like, I want to, in my mind, create a television that shows me a picture of Russia, right? And I want to see the city of Moscow. Okay, so in your mind, you've created this little window, this little thing to help you with your remote viewing. That's a practice. That's a mental exercise. But the next step to that is, I need my little TV to have legs and feet, and I want it to go to Moscow to show me fresh images of Moscow there. You can send your energy to someplace else and it be connected to you. But it's not ever going to possess someone unless somebody is in that fear place. And most of the time, genuinely, I've seen this happen. Somebody played with this shit and somebody took that into them. And then that person walking around in the world, like, I feel like I have a split personality. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm possessed. Like, that can happen, but it's really fucking rare. Like, it's so hard to do that I've only seen it twice. And it was genuinely like, one person fucking around with stuff just to see what would happen.
Yeah, we
And it's
like to do
also
that.
really easy to take the part of you that you have spent all that time creating, that remote. I use the word loosely. It's not really an entity. It's just a part of yourself that you've reached out with.
Remote
It's really
energy.
easy. Yeah, it's really easy to pull that back because choice.
Yeah. And that theme of choice is
I,
so woven into this because the null void person has chosen
yes.
to abandon their blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we can choose to step into more love. We can choose to look toward the light. We can choose to do the shadow light journey. And we can
Yeah.
choose to have faith in ourselves and our guide's power to
Yeah.
protect us. I remember, I'll just share a little story. I remember I had this unshakable knowing that if dark entities existed, I was immune. I was like, they will never touch me because I
Yeah.
believe they will never touch me. And then there
Yep.
was a period of time where I was in a really toxic relationship, and this person started telling me about the demons he had connected with. And all of a
Right.
sudden, my fear got churned up, and I literally came to energetic harm. How did that happen? Because I believed it could happen.
Yeah.
And I chose
There
to
is.
corroborate his story, like the
Yes.
choice, right?
Yes. I mean, there is something about, I mean, I did grow, I'm very far away from kind of the Christian indoctrination because I've done so much work, along the way. And, but one thing that has never left me, my grandma, not my great grandma, but my grandma, my mom's mom, this woman is amazing, was amazing. She has passed on, but she talked about, I don't remember what scripture it is, but there's one of the ones where they talk about the armor of God, putting on the armor of God. And she read that every day and out loud, sometimes even. And I remember asking, like, why do you feel like you need to do that? She goes, I just need to remind myself that love is in everything and that God is love and that nothing can hurt me unless I choose to let it hurt me. And the armor of God makes me feel like I can do that easier. And I was like, huh, that is so cool because there is something about untangling, like understanding that a null void did it by choice, that you can choose not to let that fuckery affect you, that dark entities aren't wandering around ready to possess the first person that stumbles across their path and that you have no choice in that, not a thing. You start to slough off these weird fears that come from heightened anxiety and disconnection from each other and isolation and loneliness and shame and the disappointment of having people disappoint you all the time and feeling like you're never seen and all these different shadows. You don't have to accept that. There's no dark entity waiting on the street corner waiting for you to walk by in an unsuspecting manner and they're going to hop in your body and make you do bad things. Not a thing.
Yeah.
Not a thing. Nor can, and I have to say this because I've heard the stories, this evil witch sent the demon to me and it was knocking on my door and I knew if I didn't put something whatever on my door, then it was gonna get in and it was gonna get me. No. Ill wishing is a thing. There is a long history of that. But do you accept it? You have a choice. You can say, I do not accept that gift of ill wishing. Go about your business.
Yeah.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Literally.
Yeah. One of my most powerful practices, I remember I was originally like taught by someone who
Yeah.
identified as a witch
Yeah.
to do daily shielding. And this was
Yeah.
such a mental load for me. And it caused more
Yeah.
fear actually, because I was like, I need to shield or things are going to get in, right? It was this fear paradigm of if I don't have the energetic boundary up, things will get in. And so I shifted. It was actually another bio number 9 that introduced me to this practice. And I've been sharing it with like every client ever
Everybody.
since,
Yeah.
which is that I have a little battery pack. I call it my
Mm-hmm.
beacon. me and my guides charge the battery pack every, I mean, it's like, I would say maybe every 3 weeks to 2 to 3 months, because the battery,
Mhm.
they take care of it, right? And if I'm
Yeah.
around like really ugly energy in the world, we'll recharge it a little bit. But I've just turned that responsibility over to them. Thank you for protecting me. I know that you're
Yeah.
going to let me know if I need to be aware, and otherwise I trust
Mhm.
everything's going to be taken care of. And just that
Yep.
practice of like not daily shielding and like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I have to protect my energy. And instead, just that trust of my energy is protected. And if it wavers, my guide will tap me on the shoulder and go, hey, recharge
Yeah.
your battery. And that's,
Yeah.
I don't have to be afraid because I know I can put it right back up. Like, that is the stuff that I really want people to know. Like,
Yes.
you have the power within you, and your guide team, whether you know who they are or not, because I was just talking
Mhm.
to someone the other day who's like, I don't really know who my guide team is. I'm like, they're there. So
They're
you can
there.
just tune into your primary guide, which is what a lot of people think of as like a guardian angel, right? Like
Sure.
that, you can just start there and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, can you help me protect me and take care of that?" And then
Yes.
over time you can develop that and
Mhm.
not be so bound up in the fear.
And null voids have guides too. They're just choosing not to listen.
Hmm.
I mean, literally a null void. I know this sounds oversimplified. All they have to do is turn around and walk into the light.
But they're choosing
They're
to
choosing
abandon
not
that
to.
path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how you talked about like the shielding thing. I've practiced in Wicca and taught a lot of like Wicca and traditional Wicca practices for years, and I too taught a lot of that shielding practice. And one of the things that I 100% admit is that I didn't know how to clarify that my gift with Earth Sense First is I've never had to shield,
Mhm.
really. Like I just do it kind of like I learned language and other modalities to try to explain how to get there, and they all did the same thing that you're explaining. Like it always seemed to trigger the fear thing. And that was one of the reasons I went away from trying to describe it that way. I talk about grounding and shielding kind of, sort of, but I really have found that if I anchor it in what their gift is, like you're energy sensitive, all you have to do is not participate in that, right? If you're empathic, you can pull your feelers back. And when I change the language around the gift, and now also adding the bio number aspect to it, there's no longer as much fear around that practice because it isn't all of a sudden this guarded, constant, protective mindset, right? Because I've had things hit me, so to speak, like energetically. And I suspect, I don't know if this is a true statement, but so far, the other Earth Sense First and I have this commonality where it kind of pings and you're like, something kind of hit you, but you kind of look around going, where did that come from? Because it doesn't really land. I don't have a
Mhm.
better way of explaining it. But null voids and dark entities also don't like those with Earth Sense First, because I think there is this anchored telepathic connection to Earth all of the time that we never disconnect. We don't know what that is. So we're kind of uncomfortable for them. The other thing I wanted to say is entities that are aliens that are inhabiting human meat suits are not dark entities. Please stop this. Please stop harassing these beautiful entities that have come here to help us.
Yeah, that's a thing. And there's so many of us that are here that were not human first, right? There's so many of us
Yes.
that were not human first, and
Yes.
but we're human
Right.
now.
We
We're
are
all sharing this
we are
human
human now.
experience.
And I will say that the one that probably makes me the most sad and most, I feel like I have like a banner carrier purpose with this, and I don't know how to like get across to people that I've heard so many conspiracy theories about the lizard people that are inside human meat suits. And I'm like, do you know that they are the most gentle, kind, compassionate entities? And they know that you have a visceral meat suit response to them that you don't, they know that they're different. But you're reacting in fear, and all they want to do is show you love from another perspective of the universe. They are often so isolated and so subjugated, and They come in black, white, green, polka dotted, male, female, all different kinds of manifestations. And they are the most gentle, amazing entities. And they are so misunderstood. And I have met very sensitive people who have that alien, I call it the alien recognition thing, which is kind of silly because we're all kind of aliens in one way. But they recognize these lizard entities in meat suits and they immediately become mean, defensive. They throw their defenses out. And these poor entities, they're not dark entities, but they kind of fold and they let you attack them and then they go away. They never reciprocate.
Yeah.
Not be targeted. They are not evil and they are not dark entities, and we need to stop that.
Well, in general, we need to stop othering each other. Like that's this us versus them mentality on this planet is so hard. And that I think I said that like right at the beginning of all of this is when someone is different than us, we want, and I'm using like the we as in the collective we, not me. I do not believe this, but we collectively want to scapegoat. We want a boogeyman. We want an excuse for why things are going the way that they are. We want to be able to point a finger and blame something other than ourselves. And we really have to stop that because that comes back to this choice and us being aligned with our choice and all of that. So as we come towards the end of our time today here, is there anything else that you wanted to share about null voids or dark entities?
I think probably to recap, one of the big things is it's choice. You cannot accept their fuckery. You can choose to not accept that. The other thing is that I have never met an evil, what people think of in a religious context, an evil entity.
Yeah.
I've never seen the idealized Hollywood version of the evil that's here to bring us to hell or whatever other. I don't understand it. Yeah. I genuinely accept that I don't understand it because I've never met one. I've met confused, I've met hurt, I've met traumatized, I've met null voids who have chosen not to participate. They are a little confusing, and when you're kind of sensitive to it, it probably does feel kind of icky, but that doesn't mean that they aren't also a soul that has chosen not to participate. It's not your job to save them. Unless it is your job.
I was going to say, unless you are the little rare case where it is, right? Go see Red.
And there genuinely is nothing to be afraid of. There isn't. People make bad decisions and poor choices and hurt people. You can have a boundary and say, you're not going to hurt me. That's okay. But it's not okay to vilify anyone. Period.
Yeah.
And when you feed that fear, you're just making yourself miserable. Like, why would you do that? I don't understand it. I want to be happy and I want to hang out with my friends. I don't want to be afraid.
And coming back to the power of unconditional love, right? And we can unconditionally love and not vilify an entity, but have nothing to do with them.
Yes. Walk away.
That's the power of choice. Obviously, there's some things in the collective happening that are against people's choices.
Yeah.
But we're talking generally in your life, you get to make every single choice in your life.
Yes. Null voids are not going to take over your body. Unless you're done with your body, they're not going to take it over. Like if you're done with it, then that's all. It's not common. It's not all the time. And there's nothing to be afraid of. It really isn't. I have never encountered, even with all the stories of people like, well, I felt this thing, or this happened to me, and this was truly this evil thing. I went, yeah, have you thought about that, though? Yeah. Are you giving it power? Let's think about this.
Yeah, malice exists.
Doesn't mean.
Sure, but.
Yes. And people that are hurt other people, and they do bad things. They do mass shootings. They blow up bombs. They oppress people. They participate in genocide. There's bad things that are happening.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily coming from a demonly possessed person. Like I've never seen that. I don't know what that is.
Well, hopefully this sheds some light for some others today. You know, it's a topic again that I hear people get in their fear about, and so we wanted to
Yeah.
talk about it. And as always, it's a delight to talk with you, Red, and to just
I love your
share this
questions.
information, of course.
I love the questions. I
And
love it.
I believe next time, in 2 weeks, we're probably going to be talking about blueprint contracts. So if there are other topics that you want to see us talk about, we have a whole list now that we're just going in order. But if you're like, oh my gosh, please talk about this thing, send us a DM, let us know. We'd be happy to add it to the list if it's a topic we want to cover, and otherwise direct you to another resource. So until next time, thank you so much, Red. Thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye for now.
2 weeks. Bye-bye.